Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our December 2017 customer webinar. Today, Phil Proct, Product Manager of Advertising Technology, Stevie Longwith, AdOps Program Manager, Christine Masters, our Director of Product Management, and Teresa Nelson, Director of Business Development, will discuss how new ad viewability standards will impact your business and what steps you can take today to boost your viewability score and keep your ad revenue flowing. We'll also look at the steps we're taking across our products and services to help you optimize your viewability. I'm Aaron Gillette, Marketing Director at townnews.com. The presentation will take about 30 minutes and a Q&A will follow. At any point you can type a question into the chat box, but we'll hold off on answering them until the end. So take it away, team.
Hello. So my name is Stevie Longwith, and I'm going to be going through the first part of this webinar. I'm the Town News Digital Ad Operations Manager, and I work closely with the entire team to research and build best practices for digital ad operations. Today's agenda will be looking at ad viewability, expectations and IAB standards affecting the industry, circling around ad viewability, discovering your score, how to know what viewability on your domain is, simple ways to improve your ad viewability, and some new block CMS features that are designed to increase your ad viewability. Impacts from advertisers and leaders. So we will be looking at how the advertising industry and advertisers are demanding ad viewability, the IAB and the MRC and the CBA standards and guidelines, and what those industry groups are, and the definition of ad viewability. The IAB is the Internet Advertising Bureau. The CBA is the Coalition for Better Ads, and the MRC is the Media Ratings Council. The definition of ad viewability and what we're looking at for goals is for 50% of the pixels of the ad to be in display for 1 second and 2 seconds for video. The goal for ad viewability is 70% or above. Viewability is rapidly changing the digital ad landscape. Bigger brands are buying based on viewability in their ad positions. This big brand purchasing power is leading to higher CPMs on highly viewable positions. Having a common metric is important to buying and selling ads. Advertisers have been purchasing impressions blindly for years, but this new metric is providing transparency for everyone to know that their ads are being viewed and are effective. All technology around page speed and advertising is being optimized to reach these new goals. So there are many new technology advances that are providing better experiences for publishers, advertisers, and readers alike, built around the new standard of making sure that ads are viewable. So this slide tells us a little bit about where we are today. Overall, average publisher viewability is below 50%. The majority, 58% of impressions, are not seen. What we are seeing is that the industry overall is still trying to catch up. The main priority is designing ad layouts and using new ad features to increase each individual position's viewability. Town News overall is in line with the graph above, but we are working through to bring up the percentages with several new product releases we'll be discussing today. Every publisher overall, their immediate goal should be on the right side of this bell curve, with 50% or above and an ultimate goal of 70% or higher ad viewability. Viewability impacts your revenue. Advertisers are already and are looking to stop buying ad impressions that are not viewable. Demand-side platforms, which is what advertisers use to buy ad impressions, have made it very easy for the advertiser to choose what percentage viewable ad positions they want to serve against. If your positions have poor ratings, the ads simply will not qualify to deliver. Below the fold inventory overall is the major downfall of viewability percentages. Lazy loading is a new feature that is the key to improving below the fold ad position performance. As lazy loading creates a bit more scarcity of impressions and inventory, CPMs will increase over time based on the rules of supply and demand. Having an ad be viewable also increases the ad's performance. Better click-through rates and conversions increase the advertiser's confidence in their purchases. Overall, there are a few different ways to determine your viewability score. Currently, DFP Premium is using active view metrics built into the query tool. You can run reports to find out the detailed viewability data for your site by size, position, and many other dimensions. DFP's small business ad server accounts are not equipped with the viewability active view metrics at this time. So being able to access that query is dependent on the DFP Premium style account. Town News IQ clients are currently provided with active view metrics in their monthly reporting. And another player in the industry, the ComScore VCE tags, also offer active view metrics baked in, but they have not yet been accredited by the MRC. So the data that we're finding from DFP is technically the most reliable.
Hey, Stevie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but a question came in. Can you clarify what DFP is?
Sure. Sorry about that. So DFP is DoubleClick for publishers. It is an ad server that is basically an industry standard ad server. It is a product of Google, and there's two different levels of it. There's DFP Premium, which is what the IQ program used to serve our ads, and then there's also DFP small business accounts that are available for users as well. So we're going to take a look here at a couple of the best practices, and I think Christina is going to speak for a moment about some of the best practices circling around the products itself and blocks and how some of these features work.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Stevie. Yeah, this stuff is really interesting, obviously, just to kind of understand that there's a lot of changes going on in the ad tech industry right now, and that we're really doing a lot of stuff to try to keep up to date with all of this and to make sure that we have essentially all of the pieces that you need to accomplish this. But as Stevie said, there's a lot of stuff within the kind of the core product itself that we're bringing to the table in order to help you kind of accomplish some of these goals. And one of the most important ones is just essentially how fast your site is and how it is set up. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that we're working on that are just related to performance and just generally speed. And then some techniques that you can use to, optimize those things. So the first thing is just to really point out that everyone should be looking at their site and really thinking through their site from a mobile-first perspective. Several of the things that we're going to talk about today, specifically the sticky ads that we'll get to in a second, some of those are desktop strategies, which is fine, but in terms of how your site is set up and what your strategies are in general, most everybody has more mobile traffic than they do desktop traffic. In addition, try to think of the articles as well, and the articles are where you're seeing a lot of traffic overall, where people are coming in from search or coming in from social sites, and just looking at those articles. So in terms of where you're spending a lot of your time, those are some really key places. In terms of really optimizing your page speed and the quality and performance of individual pages, definitely some things that you want to look at are how many ads you have on the page, how many programmatic ads you have, how many local ads, any kinds of third-party widgets or embed codes or scripts from other vendors. Those are all the things that might have the capability of producing latency, or basically where something gets kind of hung up when the page is loading. So all of those things are really important things to evaluate when looking at your site responsiveness. One thing that we really like to kind of talk about is how much revenue you're getting on a, it's called RPM, which is basically the revenue per 1,000 page views. And everyone should really know the RPM, the just general RPM for their site. And it really helps to evaluate what, like how much your traffic is worth, and it helps you make decisions on what to include on your page. One thing to think about is that that there is a loss of page views for every increase in seconds that it takes longer for your page to load. And if you're more interested in going about this in depth, we actually have a webinar that we did a couple months ago that is available that we really go into depth on this. But just consider that, if you add an additional 2 seconds of download time to your page, that you're probably seeing, a 10 to 15% decrease in page views because of how much longer it takes to load those pages. And if you know your revenue per page number, then you'll be able to say that putting that widget on the page is actually costing you $10,000 or whatever the calculation ends up being. And that's just something that's really good to know, because if you're adding that to your page because you're getting $200 a month for it, but it's costing you 100,000 page views in terms of the amount of time that it takes to load your sites, that's a calculation that should be something that you obviously are looking into. So that's something that hopefully you can evaluate and then look at those things on a page-by-page basis. And then remember that because of the impact on page speed and the decrease in page views that is caused by the time it takes to load those pages, it doesn't mean that having more ads in the page means more revenue, because you could end up losing page views because of that. So that's something that we'd like you to kind of think about when you're evaluating all these different techniques, is to consider that in terms of your ad map on the page. So we actually have a lot of strategies that we employ here that you don't necessarily have to activate on your site. This is just something that we do as the part of just being with Town News. We're adding these things to your site, and we're doing a lot of things in terms of improving our technology here at Town News. A couple of things that we wanted to talk about very briefly is, and these are available with our Flex templates. If you're not on Flex templates now, I would definitely ask your salesperson about it, because there's a lot of improvements that we're making that are applicable to the Flex templates. So the first thing is, by default, our Flex templates have very minimal use of actually images in the design itself. There's a couple of icons and things like that, and those are typically actually fonts, which are much easier to load. But in terms of having shadows or backgrounds or anything like that, there's almost no images that are included by default. And that really helps with how fast the pages load. We have gone through the site and reorganized the loading priority of our CSS and JavaScript to really optimize for getting the first part of the page downloaded as soon as possible. We have compressed our CSS and JavaScript and really changed how kind of individual block customizations are made, so that the browser isn't recalculating the page layout as it's loading. And this has helped with the reflow of the page and having the first part of the page load more quickly. We've recently, earlier this year, launched HTTP2 technology, which is a faster protocol for delivering libraries and JavaScript files that are part of the Town News library network. So that HTTP2 technology actually allows us to download multiple files concurrently. It's called multiplexing, and instead of having a couple of files loaded, one after the other, it's loading a bunch of files all at the same time. So because of the way that we're loading some of those library files and how we've implemented that on our servers, that's been a big benefit to anybody running those Flex templates. In addition to, as Stevie mentioned previously, we've recently done some lazy loading of our ad technology, and that actually, in addition to helping viewability, it really actually does help the performance of the page as well, because those ads that are not seen are not being loaded. So that helps with that as well. And we also do some lazy loading of content as well. And we're always looking at new techniques and better techniques for how to load videos, ads, images, all of that stuff.
Can you explain what lazy loading is?
Yeah, so for lazy loading can happen for content and for ads. And I won't get too far into it because I think Phil's going to be talking about it a little bit more. But in general, the idea is that we only load things that are in the browser view of that user. And then as they scroll down the page, things that come into view will then be loaded on the fly. So essentially, if a user comes to the site, the bottom leaderboard is not within their viewport, then the bottom leaderboard is not loaded. You won't get a page view for it, you won't get an impression for it, you won't get the hit in terms of downloading the image or the hit of talking to the ad server. And so the page will be more efficient, and the ad won't hit you for an unviewed impression, if that makes sense, of that ad. But you won't get that ad impression. So that's kind of the drawback of doing lazy loading of ads, is that your overall ad impressions will go down, but you're losing those non-viewed ad impressions that, like Stevie was mentioning, that's not what the advertisers want to pay for anyway. So and I'll let Phil talk a little bit more about that. So it is an interesting new technique that's now available. A couple other really quick things to talk about in terms of site speed and responsiveness. One thing that I know that we've been working with several people on in terms of evaluating their page speed scores. And this is essentially where you go to, there's a couple different ways to do it, and there's several different technologies that you can use. There's the Google page speed tools, there's a Yahoo tool, there's, I personally like a tool called GT Metrics with the X at the end, and we can probably put that in the show notes of the webinar. But that basically allows you to go into your site, and it will give you an evaluation of how long it takes to load your page and what some of the higher level hits that you're taking in terms of, like, this particular widget is very slow. This is a really big file. You should consider to reduce that file. One thing in terms of expectations when you run those types of tools, the first one is that essentially any publisher page that has multiple, ads on it or widgets or programmatic ads on it will most likely get a very low score. That's just because, ad technology in general is very resource intense. It has a lot of hits to outside servers, a lot of redirects, a lot of latencies, and those things are going to show up in that page view report. As we mentioned previously, you should be looking at your ad map, and you should be really thinking about where all of your ads are going to go, but it's very probable that you will all have ads, and in that case, it's going to be difficult to get a really high-scoring page. That being said, one thing that you can do, just in terms of, especially if you're on the content side of the atmosphere, you can kind of look at those metrics and turn off. You basically do ad blocking when you're evaluating those pages. So that kind of takes the ads out of the equation and then leaves the services that are on your page that are much easier to fix. So for example, if you do ad blocking on when you're evaluating that page, especially in GT metrics, it's just a little checkbox you can add. Then you're going to see a report that maybe you're getting a B grade now for your report, and you can go in and look and see that the logo at the top of the page is 300 pixels wide, but the file itself is actually 600 pixels, and that might be something that you could very easily optimize and have a slight improvement on your page without having to make any big decisions about moving around ads or getting rid of ads. So that will help you kind of evaluate your site and make some of those really easy decisions, and then obviously leave the hard decisions about changing around your ad map or changing maybe the flow of your page itself to a bigger, committee process that you might have at your site. The other thing to really look at is what we call a time to interact, and this is something that a lot of people in the industry now are talking about, which is this is essentially the time when the user can start kind of scrolling down your page and can start clicking on things on the page. And this is really, a lot of studies have found that this is the time when the user is no longer frustrated by, or they don't feel like they're downloading your page anymore. So if you can get that time to interact as low as possible, as soon as possible, so that user comes to your site, let's say a second later, they're able to start scrolling down and clicking on headlines that they find interesting, they're going to be not frustrated about your site experience, even if you've got some other services that still continue to load as they're looking around the page. So that's the thing that's really important, is to get that time to interact as soon as possible so that your users feel like they got the page and they're looking around and they're starting to interact. And then that way, things can continue to load kind of asynchronously as they're looking through the page and they're not frustrated or annoyed. I just wanted to mention that through a lot of the features that I've mentioned on the previous slide, where we're trying to improve how the site is loaded and HTTP2 and all that stuff, we've actually seen our overall metrics for time to interact for all of Town News. We've seen it actually sped up by 18% since last year, just because of the different types of changes to our technology that we've made over the last year. So we're really happy about that, and we're continuing to look at ways to improve that score.
Yes. So what we're going to talk about a little bit for a moment is the viewability and responsive design. So one of the things that is wonderful about Flex templates is that they do have responsive design, so that you can design the ad or design the entire page and it can be viewed on any device. One of the things that we've noticed about this is that the majority of users are still designing for desktop first, which has changed in the industry in the past few years. So the switch over to designing for mobile first is going to be one of the most critical things for not only viewability, but the time to interact and the usability of your site on a mobile device. Over 50% of all of the internet and also all of Town News' traffic is mobile. So designing for mobile first should be one of your top priorities. Always remember that an ad that has high viewability on a desktop device may have terrible viewability on a mobile device, and vice versa. So making sure that you're checking metrics for both device types is critical going forward. One of the basic design features and drawbacks that we want to make sure people are checking is that if you are not using lazy loading, that your right rail ads are not going below the content on mobile devices. So making sure that when you are designing mobile, your ads are of top concern and they are viewable or lazy loaded. One of the other things that has changed a bit in the industry is some of the ad sizes that are recommended. Vertical ad sizes have become more popular since vertical ads have a higher chance of being viewable. What we are seeing in the IQ program and across the industry is that the taller ads are coming back and new are being designed. A 160 by 600 or a 300 by 600, as you can see on this chart, have the highest viewability. Since the vertical space of the ad is on the screen for such a long period of time, it is much easier for them to register as a viewed ad. A 300 by 250 is still a solid size. 728 by 90 ads are a little bit lower. And then the 320 by 50s on mobile are going to be a little bit lower yet. But what we want to remember is the taller the ad, the more opportunity it has to be measured as in view, with the caveat of ensuring that it's not taking up too much of the real estate on the screen. The most viewable positions on the page are not always necessarily what you think they would be. Ads at the very top of the page are typically still very viewable, but down the page, ads that are considered right at the fold or right above the fold typically have a higher viewability, since the user's initial reaction to a page is to scroll down to see the content. Also keep in mind, again, with the mobile versus desktop design, that a design on a mobile phone is going to be drastically different of where the ad is at the fold. Viewability by location is important. We look at ATF versus BTF. So we're looking at about 35% of the ads above the fold having less than 50% viewability. But the opposite is almost true below the fold, where only 21% of below the fold ads have higher than 50%. So watching and monitoring the viewability by position is important, not just considering the fold location. We do have a quick little slide here on the Coalition for Better Ad Standards. So there's a new ad standard that has come out in the past few months that is going to apply to all domains over the next year here. And they have different types of ads that we need to make sure that are being avoided. Pop-up ads, prestitials, especially on mobile, any ad that has a higher density than 30%, that's where you're going to want to make sure that you're not putting 300 by 600 ads on a mobile phone, since they take up the entire screen. Any ad that autoplays with sound, any flashing animation. What this will do is the browsers overall, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, are going to start enforcing these better ad standards. And if your site violates these standards, they will prevent your domain from showing any advertising at all. So it's going to be critical moving forward that you provide a good experience for your users and readers to ensure that they're not going to, that they, being the browsers, are not going to block all of your advertising. And then overall, a few more best practices is to ensure that you're placing ads with ad blocks. Avoiding fixed positions will be important going forward, since fixed positions and lazy loading are not necessarily compatible. The ad blocks give you more flexibility to move things around based on viewability performance. Using multiple ad sizes and size arrays can increase your CPMs and your fill rates. So having a block that can serve multiple ad sizes has some benefits. And then complying with those Coalition for Better Ad Standards and using user-friendly ads is going to be important as well, to make sure that your site doesn't lose all of its advertising based on the browser standards.
Yep. Thank you, Stevie, and thank you, Christine. Christine might also pipe up during this presentation as well. I'll look to her to see if she has anything to add. What I want to do for the sake of time, I think, is kind of run through these, but of course I want to also preface all of this in that a lot of this is already on our help site. If you want to know and find out more about these features, most of them are already released, and we've done and recently done highlights to kind of talk to you more about these. But we are also including now, with a lot of these new features that we're including, easy how-to guides on how to easily implement these steps. It's like you're talking about, but 1 in 5 steps around there to get yourself these higher viewability ad positions. So before I kind of dive into that, just know that there is documentation live today on our help site to kind of implement some of these new features. So the first one of which is DFP size mapping. And this is an optimization for those sites who are using DoubleClick for Publishers ad serving. Allows essentially these sites to display responsive ads sized appropriately for the viewer's screen size. And what I mean by that is we're not taking the time now to load or to check for all sites. Instead, we have an array that's going to be based on the viewport that the user is currently in or that the reader is currently viewing from, and then ad sizes that are going to accommodate that specific viewport. So you're not going to have that worst case scenario where you're on a mobile and you actually see that desktop size ad actually appearing. Instead, we're taking steps to make sure that that's not going to happen with this Google DFP size mapping feature. And what we've seen, of course, before, because it's going to be asynchronously loading, we're not wasting the time to actually load those larger sizes. Ads are actually going to surf faster. So this is something that's already out for those existing sites who are already using DFP. And what we've also noticed is that we've actually seen a 3 to 5% increase in viewability for those sites who actually have it. And that was during the beta test phase. And now that every site more or less has this, we're already taking steps to ensure that your viewability is actually being increased because of this. So the next few ones, like I mentioned before, is that we do have documentation now on how to easily implement this. I'll kind of talk briefly about what this is or what these are. The next few slides are referred to the sticky positions. And sticky, what I mean by sticky is that these highly viewable ad placements are actually going to follow the reader as they scroll down the page. There are a few of these positions that I'll talk about. The first one is the sticky article aside. Some of the things to kind of think about here is that more or less this is desktop only, and it depends heavily on whether or not that article that you're looking at or viewing has related content that's already on that article. Otherwise, there is a setting that you can do in URL properties to always load this aside. That's what I mean, I guess, by the aside, is that it appears more or less to the left of your content on that related content rail. But if you don't have any related content for some rails, you can always enforce that this position always loads. And again, this is available in utility regions. There will be the step-by-step documentation on how to implement this, but this is one position, just one of a few that I'm going to be talking about here that are really going to help improve your viewability for these ad spots. Something else to consider is how your page layout is currently. So if you have or you don't have a right rail, there's an option to turn this off currently in URL properties. It will really dictate on how large of a property you can actually have in this left rail. So if you aren't using a right side rail, then you only have about, I think, 120. I'm not sure. Christine, is it?
It's about 200, I think.
About 200 pixels to work with. So you might need to add a new ad block that's going to target those specific ad sizes. But in this example that's pictured here, you're looking at an article that does not have a right rail. Therefore, there's extended space that you can place a 300 by 250 or a 300, in this case, by 600 skyscraper block, ad block. Again, as the user scrolls down this page, this ad's going to follow them all the way down until there is no more content. So this essentially is going to obviously increase viewability, but it's also available in utility regions, and we have step-by-step documentation on how to do that. The next one,
you said I could talk during this, just
we're 5 minutes past that we.
Yeah, but just really quickly, I think that everybody has kind of the concept of, as you're reading the article, and it's maybe a longer article, at some point the right rail content, your ads or your extra content will end, and at some point the side rail, the related content will end, and then you're left with essentially just the article, and there might be some in-story ads in there, but basically the two spaces on the side are completely empty as you're scrolling down the page. So both of these things are a great way to actually add content that will travel with the user as it goes down, and it really optimizes that area as you can actually use it and sell it.
Right, and the sticky aside, the first one that I did show is going to appear generally higher above this one, which I'm now going to be talking about, the right rail, which the right rail always is appended to the bottom of your current right rail. So that's important to kind of figure if you have a long page, or if you have a home page that's going to be very long and you have a right rail that ends after a certain amount of time, this sticky article or this sticky region is going to be appended to that bottom right rail, and it's going to follow that user all the way down. Where on articles, you can do the same thing, where it'll follow the user all the way down. With the sticky article aside on that left side, then it's going to appear usually more prominently at the top, generally. So if you only have a couple related articles, but you have a long article, it's going to appear there, and it's going to float with the user all the way down as the person's reading the article. The sticky right rail, similar concept, but obviously on the right rail. And there are a few different options that you can use to place this. There's the front, global, index, and asset only. So to kind of talk a little bit more about this, the front, global, and index positions are all accessible on the individual URLs. So you would either double click a section and place this particular block as you would any other block while you're editing in the block editor. The asset only, if you only wanted this sticky right rail, this ad position to follow users on assets or content generally, then you would place this in a new utility region. So all of this, of course, and I'll repeat it again and probably again and again, is that this is all available on how-to guides recently released. So if you want to implement either of these sticky to right rails, you can do so by obviously following this documentation. And then I think the other thing to note here about these two is that you're generally going to see these in medium to desktop sizes. This is not something that will generally load for a right rail, however, or for mobile. However, they will load, but they're also going to be pushed to the bottom. So if this is a block that's placed into a utility region, or it's a block that's placed into the front, global, or index regions on a page, it's always going to load, unless you use these, what they're called viewability or visibility classes that you can append to these ad blocks that'll dictate do not show either on large desktop or do not show on medium desktop, only show mobile. You can do that with a lot of these ad blocks to ensure that these only appear in certain viewports. So that's also something that you should consider when kind of looking at your site and deciding where you want to place these. If there's only a mobile only position you want to do, you can do that with these utility regions. And the next one, the last one, is the sticky anchor ad. This is something I'm sure many of you have seen in just kind of passing. This is now easily added to your site, your existing sites, but generally this appears at the bottom of each page. And to access this, you'll be going to the block editor, utility regions section, and then all pages is a new section that we have for utility regions. And then the sticky anchor is, I believe it's now available. Yep, as of, I think, Tuesday. As you can see, this region is collapsible. It has a little toggle on it for front-end users to actually close or reopen. If they would want to hide this ad, they can choose to do so. But just note that if they go to another page, it'll reopen and it'll be there again. So these three positions in particular are obviously aimed to help sites increase their viewability. But this one in particular is actually mobile friendly, so you can ensure that this is going to have a nice user experience whether they're on small, medium, or large viewports. Anything else you want to add to that, Christine? Okay. The next one is a vertical gallery article position, or a view. What's the word I'm looking for? Presentation mode we have for articles. So this is. We've seen higher engagement with these. These are more mobile friendly. So instead of using a paging gallery, this new presentation mode will actually follow users on scroll all the way down. It's more, of course, mobile friendly. But then you can set the ad interval for how often your programmatic ads can appear. These are generally required a fixed position in order for these ads to appear. But in the URL properties for this particular URL, you can set, X, I want this to appear every 2 or 3 items that are actually going to be included. And then each card is actually a virtual page view. So we've seen great results from a lot of sites who are actually using this vertical gallery presentation mode, but it's also led to higher viewability for those positions, for those ads as well. Other one here is automatic ad placements. These are now available under the advertising group in the URL properties panel on the block editor. When this setting's enabled, stories will show one ad after the third paragraph of the article, and then another same sort of concept, every X number of paragraphs, where X is the number that you can set by just kind of entering that. Something more important to note here is that in order for these automatic ad placements to appear, you will have to first take into consideration any of the 3 fixed positions that you probably already have on your articles. So each article, if it's long enough, will actually insert 3 fixed ad positions, and then this new automatic ad placements will then take over after that. So if you don't have any if you don't have any fixed ad positions, these automatic ad placements will not come in until around like the 11th paragraph, let's say. But otherwise, it won't just kind of automatically stack up above or take priority over any of those. This takes into account your fixed ad positions that are already in story. Another thing about this to note is that this requires user interaction, so you won't actually get any of those impressions for ads unless the user is actually scrolling down, and those will then appear. So that's, of course, another way to ensure that viewability is maintained.
I have one quick thing to add to this one. One of the things that we did when implementing this feature, you actually have to turn on a different mode for how your ads on articles will show, and it's something like ad layout or story ad layout or something. It's a URL property. So when you turn this on, one of the other things that we kind of fixed with implementing this is if you have a story that's very short, previously the default for really short stories was that it still showed the top, medium, and bottom fixed positions for those pages. And as Stevie mentioned, that can lead to problems with ad density and better ad standards, and might put you at risk of being in violation of the better ad standards, which, as she said, might get the ads blocked on some browsers in the future. So one of the things that we did with this new ad placements mode is that it's, like Phil said, you can choose to have an ad every 3 paragraphs. If there's only 2 paragraphs, you're only going to have 1 ad. So we actually have a better algorithm for how to deal with ad positions in stories for short stories as well. So that's a good thing to note, that as you're looking at this, that we're thinking about all those things as we're implementing these new features.
Thank you. Another one is auto refresh. So many ad servers or ad networks limit how many times an ad can actually be refreshed because they're trying to reduce any invalid traffic caused by ad refreshes happening when users are not actually engaged with the page. So what this kind of means is that if the worst case scenario in this is that I'm viewing a page, I get up, I have a seat, and I leave, but these ads are still refreshing in the background. So those are reporting inaccurate actual views for that ad. So what we've actually done is that we're more or less handshaking with those ad servers and this auto refresh technology to actually apply a new setting. This is our new recommended setting that's going to refresh all ads in view due to user action. And this is occurring currently every, I believe, 10 seconds. So right now what that means is that if I am that person and I do get up, the ad will not refresh. It won't refresh because I'm not interacting with the page. And interactions could be paging through galleries, or it could be just scrolling down the page. So based on that, and having that more or less that relationship with those ad servers, we're adhering to their standards. We're not violating, we're not doing anything that's going to harm them, but we are actually going to increase your viewability numbers by ensuring that those ads that are refreshing are indeed viewable and viewed by that end user. Whether, of course, in any size viewport, these ads will refresh. But we also want to maintain a nice user experience while they're on this page. So we want to make sure that they're not seeing ads refresh all the time, it's jarring, and then it's okay to the end user. So what we're doing is actually coming soon, we're going to be extending that time likely to 20 seconds. And to further ensure better user experience, we're not going to refresh ads if you're, let's say, scrolling up the page. So this is what we're more or less calling the smart timing feature to ensure higher viewability.
And this is a particular area where we're spending a lot of essentially research and looking at how this particular feature is performing, and then continuing to make tweaks to this, because our goal with this is to get a lot of additional ad impressions and getting only viewable ad impressions. So
Right.
we want to try to ensure that everything that we're doing within this feature is getting viewable ad impressions. So we're going to continue to kind of tweak and add logic and additional kind of predictive behaviors for when people are going to be seeing ads, things like that, try to load them early as part of this feature.
Right. And I did mention that one setting, our recommended setting, was that refresh all ads in view due to user reaction every 10 seconds. That's our recommended setting. Right now there are two other settings, one of which is refresh all ads when possible, which is more or less dictated by your ad server. So if the ad is set up to allow refreshing, it will do so. The caveat there is that, let's say you have an ad that's set up to refresh, that's below the fold. That will refresh every given number of seconds. So whether a user is actually viewing it or not, it'll still refresh. The handshake here is that our recommended setting is that it will only refresh if it's actually viewed in that user's viewport. So we recommend that one. The other setting, of course, is to disable auto refresh altogether, which will override even your ads that you have set to automatically refresh. And the last of which is probably the most important that we've talked about a few other times is the lazy ad loading. This is now available in the, I believe, advertising panel for every URL or for URL settings. But this greatly improves the viewability and page performance for your ads. ATF refers to above the fold and these fixed positions that Stevie had mentioned earlier. These ads that are more or less kind of coming from your ad server that are already indicating above the fold will actually load at the time the page is actually being rendered. So in other words, it will always load if you are coming to the site, these above the fold and fixed positions. This is what Stevie kind of meant by these fixed positions don't really work with lazy loading. So that's why we'd recommend that you use blocks for a lot of this if you're going to do that. And then we also have a setting within blocks currently that within these ad blocks that you can actually set to always load. So let's say if you have, and you want to make an easy transition into this lazy loading feature, what you can do is actually go back in, turn lazy loading on, and then set the few blocks that you need. You absolutely need to have them load when a page loads. You can actually set that in a block, in the ad block, to actually always load. So what this is, and what we've been kind of talking about, what the whole purpose of this is to increase viewability. We want to get to that 70%. This is one thing that you probably absolutely should do, is actually set this the lazy loading, or get lazy loading and as quickly as possible, because what is it, January that we're looking at potential harm from programmatic?
You won't get to 70% viewability without lazy loading.
Right. But the point of this is that you have to get to that point, and in order to get to that point, you have to turn lazy loading on, but we understand that you have campaigns that you need to be filling, and you need to be able to get there. That's why we allow this setting in the ad blocks, individual ad blocks, to always load. So what we would probably recommend is choose a page, choose a section, and turn lazy loading on. And then if you needed to have a specific ad block that needs to always load, you can do that now, overriding essentially that lazy loading setting. Is there anything that I need to mention? Otherwise, of course, I already mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. There are steps on how to implement all of this stuff on our help site. So please, after this meeting and after you've watched the video, I would recommend hopping on there and just looking for how to turn on lazy ad loading, how to add a sticky aside rail, how to add a sticky right rail, so on and so forth. So all of these features are very important and essential to getting to that 70% by January. So take the time after this to kind of look at that.
Yeah, so just a few next steps and some takeaways here real quick. Next steps that you can take to improve viewability. So as Phil just mentioned, it has already taken place that the industry has the ability, the advertisers have the ability to buy based on your viewability. And it is going to probably kick into high gear the first of the year. So when that happens, if you do not make these changes, you will notice CPMs and fill rates on programmatic advertising taking a drop. So these are things you need to do to protect your inventory from losing that revenue in the coming months. First, change any fixed positions that you can to blocks ads. Obviously, there's some behavior with the in-story ads, but if you have the fixed right rail ads, changing those to blocks ads gives you that flexibility to implement lazy loading. Designing for mobile and desktop separately needs to be a critical thought process, making sure that your page looks good on a mobile screen and that the ads are viewable in the right positions, and also on desktop, but ensuring that both of those are very serious considerations are important. Turning on lazy loading is key. There is basically no functional way to get to 70% viewability without using lazy loading.
If you have ads on your pages.
Yeah, if you have ads. Using vertical ad sizes so that they have a higher chance of being viewed. So those article asides using a 160 by 600, and implementing inline and in-story ads. So adding ads throughout the page during different viewports and making sure that there is ad positions sparsed properly and that they're not all stacked in one area is very important. Shifting ad positions to sticky. So if that 728 by 90 bottom leaderboard is right above your footer is never viewed, it might be more beneficial for you to turn that into that sticky anchor ad so that it is viewed on almost every single page load. And then also stay tuned for further features and best practices. Know that our team is working hard on these features at all times, and that we will continue to release more updates like the smart timing and refresh and things like that in the coming months. We do have a slide with some valuable links, so you guys will have access to these with the presentation, and these are places where we sourced some of this information. There's Google information here about viewability statistics and standards in the industry. There are some links for some page download testing tools, and some more definitions on the metrics that we have covered today as well. Your takeaways are going to be to make sure that you're making changes now to improve this viewability statistic. As we mentioned, fill and revenue are already being impacted and will continue to be impacted. So make sure that your goal is that 70% score. If you are making changes as an IQ partner, make sure that you notify the ad ops team that you're making changes in your ad positions, and we will make updates on our side to ensure that you don't have any delays or interruptions in ad delivery as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, all. This was a great presentation. We've gone over a little bit on time because we did have an awful lot to cover, but we do have quite a few questions to go through, and we're going to try and get to all of them. So maybe we'll do a speed round here. Mm-hmm. First of all, several folks have asked if the webinar recording will be distributed. Yes, we'll process it today. Get it posted. We will distribute the recording. We'll email you along with the slide deck, these links, supplemental materials, etc. You will get all of that. First question, for IQ participants, do we only get viewability data on the IQ ads? What about our own local ads?
You only get viewability data if your ads are running through a DFP premium server. So if your local ads are running through Ad Manager, you do not have viewability information.
Or small business.
Or small business.
Okay. What is the industry average RPM? What's our goal?
Okay. I would say, so in general, you could have anything on your individual pages can count towards your revenue per page. So things like Outbrain, things like local sponsorships, ads, widgets, partnerships, any of those things can count towards that number. I would say that, if you're looking at just kind of, a couple of ads and maybe a lot of programmatic ads and not a lot of locally sold ads, you might be in the $6 to $10 range. If you've got some locally sold ads, you should be up in the $20, $25 range. Adding everything together, it could be even higher than that. So obviously, in terms of your goal for your page, you can look at what you're doing now and what you think that where you need to be. That's kind of an individual choice in your area, but definitely that's something that you should know and then try to improve that as part of your metrics for the year.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that as inventory becomes scarcer, you're going to want to adjust your local prices to accommodate that. You should be able to make more, they're more valuable, and so are the sticky type ads would be more valuable. So unfortunately, we see a huge range in RPMs depending on your location, how many ads you have, what kind of page it is, and you can, as Christine pointed out, have everything from, you know, $10 up to, we have people who say they have $100 RPMs. So it does vary, and it is very specific to you.
Is there a tool available that can calculate why additional page load time equals X amount of lost page views?
There's, you know, if you actually look at our previous webinar that I mentioned, and maybe we could link to that in the notes of this webinar, I actually came up with a little Excel spreadsheet calculator that might help, and there's probably stuff on the internet for that as well, but there's a couple of numbers out there that say that if you have like a 1 second loss in page views, I think it's a 10, or 1 second loss, or 1 second increase in time, then you have I think it's 10% or maybe 5% loss in page views. So, but we can get you that, include that in the show notes of the page as well, and then that helps you with those calculations.
Okay. If you have flex templates, they've already been optimized for responsiveness and speed, correct?
That is correct. There's always things for speed that you can make sure you're looking at a local level. Most sites will have additional things added to the page, additional video widgets and things like that that are added as well, external services. So there's always things to optimize, but in terms of, you know, everything that we can do from our side, we are always actively looking at any kind of technology that we can do. Size mapping is a good example of that, where that's something that we figured out a way to reevaluate how the DFP ads were actually serving to the page, and without any work on your side, that was something that we could optimize that actually helped globally all of our sites. So we're always looking for those types of things. But yeah, if you're on Flex templates, you will already have the mobile responsive site and the optimized site. That's correct.
Our ad blocks, especially the leaderboard position, are the last site elements to load up for both the desktop and mobile views on our sites. Can these ad blocks be given a higher load priority?
I would say that you could, what I would probably do is submit a CRM ticket and maybe have somebody look at that, like how you're loading it, the kind of ad that it is. In general, there's not really a priority for how it's loaded, but there might be some techniques that you could use to improve.
How can we tell if our site is using lazy loading?
In general, it's a URL property that you can look at, but as you're scrolling down the page, you'll kind of see the ads pop in as you're scrolling down, and that's one way to tell.
Yeah.
So this is Stevie, by the way, real quick. The easiest way that I found out is to go into your page customizations and check your advertising page customizations. There's a checkbox there for lazy loading.
If we have a right rail, don't right rail ads go below the main content on mobile by default? How can we prevent the ads but not the rest of the content in the right rail from going to the bottom on mobile other than lazy load?
So there's a couple ways to do that. One is there's something called smart ads, which will have the rail ads go into the article and replace the in-story ads on mobile. Or you could actually use the visibility classes to hide those ads when you go to mobile, and then maybe put different ads on the mobile side.
What are prestitial ads?
Okay, a prestitial ad is an ad that pops up before you're able to access a page. So interstitials usually are between page views. So if you're on the home page and then you click on an article and you get a pop-up between those two. A prestitial would be if you typed in the URL for the home page, you went to that site and there was a pop-up ad or a full screen ad that you had to access before you could get to the page content on your initial page load.
Yeah, and then postitial is going to be if you are leaving that page, it will pop up after that as well. So those are the three different types.
Okay. Will 300 by 250 ads be allowed on mobile phones within articles or below articles?
Yes.
Yeah, and just to, because I think one of the things about that is the 30% rule. The 30% is the total space of your content, like your story itself. It's not necessarily the viewport. So it's the total space that your article takes up. So look at if your article is 1,200 pixels tall, how many ads are allowed to be added to that as a whole, not just on the screen itself.
Okay. Will animated GIF ads be blocked on mobile going forward?
Animated GIF ads are fairly safe. Just ensure that if you're creating these ads, that you're compressing them for file size so that the render time is rapid and you're not delaying any other elements on the page.
And sound, if you have any sound.
What do we mean by avoiding fixed positions for ads? Does this include the fixed positions that Blocks offers, and how do we change that on our site?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Stevie. Just very quickly, in general, we kind of have a strategy going forward that we're moving more towards block ads because they're a lot more flexible. They allow you a lot more kind of creativity and a lot more optimization for your particular ad layout. So in general, we're moving more towards blocks. But there are some fixed positions that still exist, and a lot of people will be using those. That's something that in general, in almost every place that exists, there's a different way to do that same type of thing, but using an ad block instead. So that's something that, kind of as you're evaluating these positions and moving more towards, instead of doing a fixed leaderboard, do a leaderboard block. And then that gives you more flexibility in terms of the ad sizes you could support, in terms of how you handle things on mobile versus desktop versus tablet, etc. It gives you a lot more flexibility in that area if you're using blocks instead.
Okay. The 300 by 250 and 300 by 600 sized ads appear on responsive mobile sized pages without scheduling them. Will this cause a viewability issue according to the last slide that was shown?
I assume that they're you just have it set up to where the same ads are showing on desktop and mobile, and that can be a change that you make, that you could decide to have, a 320 by 50 or a 320 by 100 on mobile instead of the 300 by 600. So that is a change that can be made in terms of how your site is set up.
I know we are talking.
Also, I'm going to make a quick note. Moving forward, we are working on a new block type that will give you some additional visibility classes. So to streamline the setup process of having a different ad size visually available on mobile versus desktop. So we are working on an optimization there where in the future you will not have to make two different blocks. So that should be coming fairly soon.
I know we are talking primarily about IQ programmatic, but how does this relate to local ads served through the Flex/Blocks internal ad server?
So in terms of the Blocks ad manager ad server, we don't report on viewability at all. So there isn't a way to determine what your viewability rates are for those local advertisers. What we've heard is that a lot of the smaller local businesses are not yet really concerned about viewability, but we anticipate that in the future they will be as people become kind of more sophisticated with online advertising. If you have customers or advertisers in your area who are asking about that, I would look at ways to see if you can use DFP and see if you can get premium DFPs, like using our ad ops services, so that you can start reporting on those numbers. But as of right now, that's something that, again, the DFP small business and ad manager do not report viewability.
Does the sticky article aside cover content?
It will not cover content.
Can you adjust the length of the scroll for the sticky right rail? Meaning for 10 seconds I want a portion of the right rail to stick, and then after so many seconds an additional portion of the right rail content sticks.
Right now, it's the very bottom region in that area. So the stuff that's in the top, the top of the region or the middle, and then the non-sticky bottom region will still kind of scroll up and out of the screen. But then when you hit the sticky region part, that will stick with you all the way down the page. We are looking at, maybe some other types of sticky positions that might be. You might stick for some time and then go off the page and then stick again for another time. But those would be new future techniques that we're kind of investigating.
Will any of this discussion or these ads affect e-editions?
That's a good question. So on e-editions, there is the River of News option that we have, and there are 2 ad positions there that you might have programmatic ads or you might have local ads in those positions. And in that respect, those being viewable or not is an issue that obviously if they're programmatic, they would want those to be highly viewable. That being said, in general, the sticky features and things like that are not part of the e-edition at this point. That's something that if you have an idea, just let us know for any thoughts you have on additional features we can help improve that experience as well.
We've been testing the use of automatic ads, but only want to use them on the mobile view. Right, pardon me. Right now, they're showing up on all viewports, even if the ad block that is called uses visibility classes. Can this be implemented?
I would say to submit a CRM ticket to us on that, and then we can look at the specific implementation that you have and kind of what you have set up. In general, I would say that the automatic, they said automatic ads, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the automatic ads are actually a good idea on mobile as well. Some of the industry recommendations that we've seen is that you want to try to have a new ad spot every 3 or 4 screens on the mobile, as well as having some on the desktop as well. So, but that being said, I would submit a ticket to us, and then we could see what you're doing, what problems you're having, and if there's a way we can address that.
Okay. Can you turn off fixed ad positions and still get the in-story ads?
There is a way to turn off fixed ad positions and only have, there's a setting called, it says there's a setting for what fixed positions you want, and you can say the in-story only. Plus there are in-story there's in-story regions into which you can place ad blocks. That's another technique that's possible. So there's a couple different options that you have there.
What are Town News' recommendations for sites that serve direct, buy, local, and programmatic? Should all ad positions be on DFP? Are these features mirrored on the Block's internal ad server so they can benefit local advertisers?
For things that are implemented as regions, so when we're talking about the automatic ads or the sticky ads or those types of things where they're essentially just a region that you can place a block into, those will work with Ad Manager. But as I said before, we don't report viewability in Ad Manager, so that won't be a feature that will be available there. But in terms of making things sticky or making things do refreshing and things like that, those would be available for Ad Manager ads.
A quick note on the splitting of ad servers. We do see latencies if you are serving ads from 2 different servers. So if you're serving your local through Ad Manager and then programmatic through DFP, there is some additional latency there because of the additional ad calls being processed. So we're working on ensuring that we have a path for as many people as possible to take full advantage of the DFP premium server. So overall, if you can make a choice for one or the other, it's ideal to serve out of simply one server rather than have two split between local and programmatic ads.
And I guess that's a good opportunity to really just say, in general, Google spends a lot more time on their on their software product. Nobody can beat Google in terms of a free ad server that's available out there, in terms of the features that they have, in terms of the engineering work that they put into that. So there's going to be a lot of things, especially in the future, where Google will have reporting and things available that Ad Manager will not. Ad Manager is meant for kind of very localized and a very easy to use, simple product that is available just for free within the software. But in general, if you're doing programmatic ads, if you're doing more advanced ad tech, then we would recommend Google DFP as your ad server.
Okay. With sticky ads, do they stick per section, top, middle, and bottom sections of the front page?
So on the front page, there's essentially one region that will stick, and it's the bottom of the rail. So the top ones will still kind of scroll by, and then the bottom, the last thing on the rail will be the thing that sticks as you continue down the page.
Okay. Is there a way to hide content that is on our desktop view that we don't want to show up on mobile? Stuff that may slow down or cause problems on mobile with Flex templates?
So I would say just very quickly that there are ways to hide things using the visibility classes, and if you kind of searched within our help site for visibility, you'll find those different classes using those bootstrap classes. However, it actually just hides it with CSS. It doesn't delay it or prevent it from being loaded. So if you kind of have like an expensive video ad or video swapper thing that's on those pages, you're not really saving mobile time from not doing that. So I would look at other ways to implement that, and just make sure, I would say again, looking at the article pages specifically. So if you have those expensive things, keep them on the front page or the index page, and then try to prevent them from showing up on the article pages.
In page customizations, it says lazy load DFP. Is lazy loading only available to DFP users? Yes. That's just for the DFP ad server for small business or for premium. That's just a technique for how to load the DFP ads. Okay. If a customer wants to switch from using Block's Ad Manager and move completely to Google DFP, is this a project that Town News will engage with as a software developer?
As a software developer, I don't know that, but yes, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. So, yeah, you can either submit a ticket or contact your sales rep.
Great, that is all of the questions. So we did that, moved through those pretty efficiently. Thank you for the excellent questions, and there are quite a few ways to stay connected to us. Our documentation, all of the documentation that Phil has discussed today is available at help.blockcms.com. You can call our support team at 800-293-9576 or visit support.townnews.com. You can share ideas with other townnews.com partners at community.townnews.com. And our service status, you can subscribe to service status updates at townnews.status.io. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We also offer a number of email newsletters that you can sign up for by visiting townnews.com, clicking on news, and there's a sidebar there that allows you to sign up for all of that information. Thank you to Phil, Christine, Teresa, and Stevie and for putting this all together, and thank you so much for all of the great questions and interaction. We really appreciate it. We will talk to you in January.